So decreasing is basically how we create shaping in knitting. So we're going to reduce the number of stitches on our needles, but we're going to do it in a way that means none of this is going to unravel. And that's going to create that lovely rounded top for your hat. So we're going to insert the needle knitwise. So normally to knit a stitch, we would go into this first stitch like that. But this time we're going to knit both of these two stitches together. So what that means is instead of going into just one, you're going to go through those first two stitches at the same time. So my right knitting needle, I'll just move that so you can see, is going through both of those, and then the rest is what you've already been doing. So we're just going to wrap the yarn around and complete the stitch as for a normal knit stitch. And as you'll see, what we started with was 2 stitches and I now have 1 on my right needle. So I'm going to do that again. We're going to do that for the whole way across this row. So instead of going into just 1, you're going through the next 2 stitches, then wrap the yarn around your needle, complete as a normal knit stitch. So you can do this purlwise as well. So to do it purlwise, we're not going to for this bit, but I will just show you anyway. To do it purlwise, you would go through both of those stitches from right to left, wrap it around and complete as a purl. So I'm just going to undo that one because we're only going to use knit 2 together for this row. So it's through 2 stitches, wrap the yarn around and complete as a normal knit stitch. So I'm going to do this the whole way along the row. So it's going to half the number of stitches that you started with. So as you should see already, it's already starting to gather in a bit because we're going to have half the number of stitches that we started with. So that's working exactly as we want it to. Okay, so we've now halved the number of stitches that we started with. So if you cast on the small size, so that was 54 stitches, you're going to have 27 now. If you cast on the medium size, which was 58 stitches, you're going to have 29 stitches. And if you cast on 62, you're going to have 31 stitches. So now we've decreased, we're going to have an odd number. So to work our next row of decreases, we're going to do the same thing, but because of that odd number, when we have 1 stitch left, we will knit the final stitch on its own and not with another stitch. So that's 2 stitches together again. So going in through both of the stitches. And then when you only have 1 stitch left, you will knit that final stitch. So if you're reading a knitting pattern, this decrease will often be written as K2 tog. So that simply is an abbreviation for knit 2 together. Okay, so now you've done that, you should only have 14, 15 or 16 stitches left now, depending on which size you started with. So now you want to cut your yarn. You want to leave a fairly decent tail because we're going to use this to gather up the top of the hat. So I'd normally say sort of 40 centimetres ish. So I'm going to cut it here. And then you want to thread the end of the yarn through your sewing needle. Like that. And then this is the clever bit. So to create the gathered up bit, we're now going to thread the yarn through all of the stitches left on the knitting needle and then pull it tight. So you're simply going through each stitch and then taking them off the knitting needle. So there's a couple ways of doing it. If you prefer, you can thread your needle through them all whilst they're still on the knitting needle, like this. So it's a little fiddly to do it. It means your stitches feel a little bit more secure because they're not coming off the needle yet, but you have to be careful because it's easy to split the yarn and not go through the full stitch. So what I tend to do is thread the yarn through the stitch one at a time, and then once I know it's safely on my needle, I slide it off the knitting needle. So you're doing this for every single stitch. Don't worry if you don't think it looks very neat at the moment. It doesn't matter. It's not finished yet. So you can then pull the yarn and gather up all of those stitches. So your piece should look like a bigger version of this. So to make sure these are secure, I like to go through them again with my sewing needle. So don't worry, you don't have to be exact. It doesn't matter if you miss a couple out. This is just purely to secure the top and make it neater. So you should feel, now you've gone around those stitches again, you should feel that it's a nice tight finish and your stitches don't feel like they're going to go anywhere. So once you've done that, you can flip your hat to the inside. So if you're not sure which is your inside and outside, you're going to look for that little tail again. If the tail's on the left of your piece, it's the outside. If you flip it over and the tail's on the right, it's the inside of your hat. So I'm going to secure this yarn with just a few small stitches. So I tend to do a couple stitches in the same place, but then pull the yarn through the loop created by the other stitch, and it just gives you a nice tight knot. So that feels a lot more secure now. So now we've done that, I'm going to weave this end in. So even though we've knotted it, you don't want to just cut your yarn because there's a lot of room for this to then unravel. So what we're going to do is weave the yarn in. So you just kind of want to pick some stitches to kind of go underneath. I try to go in a diagonal. It's much easier once you get onto this moss stitch section. So I will go under one and then go under the one diagonally down. And again and again. So you want to do that till you've secured sort of 5 centimeters of yarn, just because if that does unravel at any point, you've got enough that you can thread your needle and do it again. So I'm just going to cut that right up to where I've woven it in.